Hello and welcome everyone to our Cyber Resilience Skills 101 webinar series. My name is Luciano. I'm from the Customer Success Management team, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. I'm pleased to welcome Anna, Jennifer, and Julian, who will be presenting an in-depth overview of Quest Change Auditor. They will address your questions during the Q&A session following the presentation. We'll take just a couple of minutes to allow more participants to join before we begin. We appreciate your patience. Thank you for waiting. Now that we have given everyone a moment to join, let's get started. This is today's agenda. We will be covering tier strategies and zero trust principles, explore why Change Auditor is essential for Active Directory and Entra ID security, and we will dive into its features for protection, searches, alerts, and reporting. With that said, I'll hand it over to Anna, Julian, and Jennifer to lead the session.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar around a Change Auditor with predicting, preventing, and protecting, and how Change Auditor is your security shield for Active Directory and Entra ID. So with myself, I'm Julian Stefan. I'm one of the senior security architects in the pre-sales group at Quest Software. So I just recently transitioned over to this role. A few months ago, I was in our professional services organization for quite a long time, doing security and consulting and migrations for our customers around Change Auditor and some of the management and migration products. So I kind of know, both sides of working with customers in their production environment and what to do as far as like configurations to go set up with Change Auditor and their product and how it can help protect their, how it can shields up their identity defense.
Yeah, and my name is Anna Malik. I've been in IT infrastructure and security for the last 18 years. The last actually 3 years, I joined Quest as a senior consultant. And I definitely prefer getting lost in nature and forgetting the technology even exists more than that.
Hi, Jen Anama. I've been in IT for about 15 years in the infrastructure and security side of the house. I as well as been with Quest for the last 3 years, and I enjoy traveling and music, and it's even better when you get to do both. Welcome.
Alrighty, so one of the first things that I wanted to talk about is things that I've kind of seen in the field and experience with our customers is, talking about their identity tiering strategies and trying to isolate, which objects in their Active Directory and Entra ID might be their crucial objects that they may need to go and protect, and how they're on their journey to zero trust. And what you're seeing here is a Microsoft's best practices model since 2020. So, most customers I think have kind of seen this over a period of time. So just, very high levels kind of shows your, the 3 planes. So we're talking, the control plane, management plane, and the user access plane. Kind of where we're focusing on today is protecting that control plane. With from the Active Directory and Entra ID side, the critical groups and objects that you need to protect and how Change Auditor can help do that. So in looking at what could be our tier 0 objects to look for in any environment. If you look at the top right, the first group of objects at the top right are what would be considered, critical groups and objects, or what should be considered the control plane or tier 0 from the Active Directory side of the house. So, your most common things you could think of: your domain head, the built-in admin account, domain admin, enterprise admins, your domain controllers, things like that. Those are always classified from Microsoft as tier 0 by default. And looking at the bottom right, you're looking at the Entra ID side, and the object tenant itself. Most of the PIM roles that you'd have to leverage for any administrative activities, like your global admin accounts or your application administrator accounts. Going through this process, I've worked with customers, when I've done security assessments for customers in the past, one of the things that we help them go and try to identify is, one of the first things that they should do is just identify what that entire control plane is. So, and those are things that I've kind of listed on the screen there, classified by Microsoft classifies by default. There are other things in your organization that you should look for classification. So things like your Entra ID connector, those MSOL accounts if you're syncing over from on-premises, anything around if you're using certificate services, your PKI servers, ADFS if you're still using it, things around if you are using any third-party PAM systems. Those are tertiary systems that in your environment, Microsoft doesn't natively classify those as tier 0, but that's something that you should add as part of your control plane. Looking at kind of the rules of tiering and protection, kind of the general rule, if you're looking to kind of set up that trying to protect your control plane, is making sure that you don't cross between different tiers. So if I have, from an organization point of view and looking at my OU containers in Active Directory, I should have a dedicated tier 0 container, and I should have the proper protections in place where only those users and groups should be properly managed from an AD perspective and properly protected from an OU container standpoint, and not cross tiers to go and say like my DA or EA account should go manage my SECM or Exchange servers, or have those accounts be service accounts that control anything at the workstation level. So I wanted to bring up this example because this was reported by the Microsoft security team in, I just want to say, late September of last year. So these are very common examples that when we talk to customers, when they're concerned about different ransomware events, and some groups, when they work with their identity or security teams and they go kind of through their tabletop exercises, they look at, okay, well, what types of things should I be looking for in the environment? And so, this is a common example of this. This is kind of an attack that was kind of layered in an environment over a period of months. So what happened with this particular group with the storm attack is that there was a ransomware package that was, they went in through like the typical ways that you try to initially access a particular environment. They were able to get on through a user workstation, and then they were able to take this ransomware package and then go ahead and decipher and compromise a domain admin account, and then take PowerShell scripts and then distribute that through the network via GPOs. What they also realized on the account that they actually compromised is that this account was also an account that was synced up to Entra ID, which had a GA role assigned to it in Entra ID. So crossing over from Active Directory to Entra ID, they were also able to compromise the on-premise Entra Connect servers, the cloud accounts that they were using for Cloud Sync. So behind the scenes on the Entra side, they were able to go and create a domain within their main tenant, create a trust, and then with that ransomware package, they created authentication tokens to deploy ransomware across their entire network, infecting a lot of their cloud infrastructure too. So what you'll see with Change Auditor and the protections and the alerts that we're going to be showing is where if they may have had these alerts and protections in place, they could have intercepted based on the six steps you kind of see here. We could have intercepted and alerted and prevented on that attack with even crossing the first or second step.
Okay, yeah. So based on what Julian just spoke about in the last slide, here are some interesting statistics for some of the perspective. These numbers actually have gone down in 2024 compared to previous year, but let's don't be fooled. Those statistics are pretty astounding still. So 80% of security breaches involved compromised identities, right? So we know that hackers are concentrating on your identity environment. 7,000 password sprayed attacks per second in 2024. So that's huge. And it takes about 21 days in average for Active Directory to be down before you can bring it up. So this is why we're here, and we want to talk about Change Auditor and how it's going to help you.
Change Auditor really provides complete security coverage for your enterprise network. It audits activities taking place in your infrastructure as they occur. So you can depend on real-time alerts with detailed information and instantly know who made the changes. And you can rely on easy-to-read reporting that contain what we call the 5 Ws. So you'll know who did what, where, and when, and even from what workstation. With Change Auditor for Active Directory, by default, audits about 2,000 events, and they're all enabled and ready to go. And included is the ability to audit Entra ID. So you'll have visibility and be able to set up alerts on something like the creation of cloud-only accounts or even role changes, as Julian mentioned. And then other areas of high value or importance is to audit security changes on group policy objects, even more audit registry and services, and more importantly, monitor changes made to local users and groups on member servers. And lastly, we offer the ability to audit access to Windows files and folders. We mention these as we know it's difficult to audit natively. And of course, we recommend setting up alerts so you have complete visibility on the events happening within your environment.
Yeah. So from a security perspective, where I've seen these in kind of real world and how these have come into play. So I've seen instances on different incidents where we've been brought in to help a customer to identify, maybe help recover their environment, and they were a change auditor customer, and so they were able to, with at least just the audit that's in place just alone, they were able to look in their environment and say, okay, I detected that on a Sunday evening at like 3 o'clock in the morning, I detected that there were random changes that were being done to the domain admins or enterprise admins groups, and there was not a production change control in place. So one of the key things to help kind of identify it, and sometimes you kind of go through this, either during, and kind of just some best practices on incident responses. There may be teams that are going to go and be kind of the SMEs on the recovery portion, or to help to nuke that event that's actually going on if it's still actively going on. But then there's also a team that's trying to go in and forensically identify, forensic investigation to go and identify, when did this potentially take place. So, I've been a part of incidents where, at least with Change Auditor, with the auditing in place, they were able to identify, okay, this attack was taking place at this particular time. So at least it gives them a time of, looking through some of their other logs to kind of say, okay, when was this ransomware package set up, or if there was a password spray attack, when was this executable placed on the network and in a server where they had the account able to actually go and execute that particular attack. It's one of the things that's very important.
Yep. Okay, so let's jump into what we're going to focus on today. So we're going to talk about protections and some of the old ones and some of the new ones that recently came on to the newer version. And I'm going to highlight this area because it's really underrated feature of Change Auditor. And what is the protection, just in case some of you are not familiar with it? For one or another reason, you want to protect the specific objects. And what that means is you want to lock down individual objects from any changes, including the highly privileged administrators too, and only allow those dedicated accounts. And that will include, removing and adding member to a group, modifying or linking, or even creating a new GPO, resetting a password to administrator, that break glass account that you have, or we can go all the way to protecting entire Active Directory NTDS database, which Julian will talk about in a little bit. But let's start with some of the basic protections that came with the product really long time ago.
Yeah. So here's an example of an attempt to change the group membership on your domain admin group. Now, that object protection, which is a preventative approach, not many can do. Natively, it is impossible to prevent domain admins from making changes, but with our protection template, you can enforce an authorized user or group to be able to make the changes. And then below is the event that was generated from that attempted modification. And just take note that the change was in fact protected. Another area that we could share is how you could protect group policy objects.
Yeah, and so with this protection template, just on the groups and objects themselves, one of the things that's very important to keep in mind from a security perspective is if there is some sort of attack that's going on, whether it's ransomware or otherwise, especially if there's a ransomware example, the one common thing that ransomware all has is that it's an executable of some type. So it has to be able to be run and executed from some place. And usually when it comes to Active Directory or syncing up to Entra ID, they need to have some of those critical group permissions on some sort of workstation in order to be able to do that. So with having those protection templates in place, you can stop that from you can stop those changes to any of those groups where, like, if a threat actor is trying to go and they'll try to compromise an account or add themselves into that DA or EA group, that protection template will stop that from happening right away. Another proactive security benefit is, a lot of times these days with customers, a lot of them are using third-party PAM systems that we mentioned earlier, where, they have something like, CyberArk or Delinea, for example, where their domain admin, enterprise admin accounts or schema admin accounts, they're protected behind some sort of third-party safe. And there's a service account that goes and rotates those passwords every 24 to 48 hours or whatever the methodology that is set. One of the cool things around protection templates is once a protection template's created, or during the creation of protection template, you can actually go in and add exemptions to who can make changes to that protection template or who are authorized to make changes to that, so that they could at least access those groups. So being able to add like your third-party PAM groups will help. That's another way to kind of help from a production operations standpoint. Only make sure that if you have them locked down where if you're not allowed to make any direct changes unless there's some emergency break glass account you have, only the service accounts behind your third-party PAM systems are allowed to make those kind of changes. It's pretty important.
Yep. So the other thing that I jumped over early is linking GPOs to the root of your domain, right? This is a new feature in since like a version or two. And you can protect your domain head from allowing anybody linking your GPOs, except those dedicated accounts. So how does that help you really? Well, attackers love GPOs and their power, and they can use them to deploy malware, right? But also from a different perspective, they can create a diversion. So, they will deploy a GPO from the domain head to, the entire organization. And while you're trying to figure out what happened and how to undo that, they will do their own reconnaissance and set up their own procedures to, deploy the ransomware or whatever else that they're looking to do. So this is a really important area. And if you have a product like maybe GPO admin that manages all the GPOs, again, dedicated account can be that proxied account that does all the changes on the behalf of that application.
One of the other protection templates that we recommend that you put on an environment right away is protecting the Active Directory database file itself, or what we call, from a technical standpoint, the ntds.did file. So, one way that some threat actors will try to go and maybe take an offline copy of that to help, prepare for some sort of attack, because that's another attack method that on the Active Directory side that we've seen in the past is, folks, if they get access and they're able to take an offline copy of that, they'll go and feed changes directly into that DIT file, and then replace that and use GPO to replicate those bad changes across the network and basically cause havoc across your Active Directory. So, there's a built-in command line tool called ntds.util that's provided for doing certain management activities if you have to. So it was kind of used for some native Windows backup utilities, things like that. So as we can kind of see here, this would be like an instance of someone trying to run ntds.util, take a copy of the offline copy of the DIT, and we're seeing that the operation terminated because it was access denied, and it's because we had our database our protection template deployed across the Active Directory database to prevent a potential DC sync attack or other unwanted execution. So if you go to the next slide, Anna. So this is the event that will show as far as if the DIT file is protected, it'll show that there was a failed access attempt across the database file. So things that you will allow within kind of that exemption portion of the template group. Things that you'll see in there very commonly as far as like replication changes and things like that for access to the DIT file will be if you are running Entra Connect servers on premises to sync up from Active Directory Entra ID. Those are the most common things that you'll see for potential replication changes. So those kind of accounts in your environment, you'll want to exempt those. Any backup accounts that you're using, if you're doing recommending 80 specific backups or just backups in general, those are accounts that you'll also want to exempt, along with potential if you are running if you are running A/B checks or have like like a EDR type of sensor that'll go and scan those files, those are certain things that you're going to want to exempt from those. Those are the common things that should be allowed to look at that file, and those are things that you're going to want to exempt. Pretty much everything else is, you should want to lock off as part of creating that protection template.
So with Change Auditor, you can audit, alert, and protect as well, access to your files and folders. This protection feature is an example of those who may natively have the rights to modify permissions, like our domain admins, but with the Change Auditor protection, they're prevented from doing so. The image on the left shows how granular the protection types that can be applied. So when an unauthorized user attempts to access those protected files, they'll receive the access is denied, which is the error to the right. The image below is the event that's generated, again, with that result of protected. And this is the way to securely enforce those who should have access can.
Yeah, so the protections overall, as you can see, are really powerful, and we recommend everybody at least trying it out, testing it on any object, test objects and see how it works if it's something that your environment can take advantage of. But we also wanted to talk about some new searches that have been added to this, to the Change Auditor over the several years.
So when an event is captured, you have all the information and can view the details and even filter based on those 5 W's that we discussed earlier. We've, of course, added some new features with searches. So now you have the ability to include or exclude events performed by users with that administrator right. And you can filter if the account is an administrator or even use a wildcard. Another new search is the ability to see all logons details by administrators in the last 24 hours, or you can adjust to whatever timestamp you're looking for. And another thing that we wanted to share with you that you may not be aware of is that ability to monitor changes made to local users and groups on your member servers. This is just another security tactic that adversaries will use to elevate their rights with, of course, the goal of trying to compromise a privileged group or your domain controller. And of course, you can always add exclusions. So for example, if you're using Lapse or a third-party solution, it's possible to add as an exception so that you only receive notifications that are out of band.
Yep. And also, as other features and searches in the product is you can identify possible DC shadow and DC sync. And you may ask really what DC shadow is. Hopefully not if you're an IT admin, but then again, today one can never assume, right? So say with Mimikatz command, you can simulate the behavior of a domain controller to push changes to Active Directory domain through the replication, bypassing most of the common security controls. And then the other super important event is that possible DC sync, right? So it speaks for itself. Syncs, aka replicates AD, including password hashes, and then attacker can extract that information, and bam, the end is really near, right? Because they already have what they need. So remember, really important searches. And then also, again, like we've been mentioning, exclusions are possible because there is going to be false positives, like MSOL account that Julian mentioned earlier, that will create that false positive DC sync. But you can exclude it to make sure that you don't even collect those events.
Okay, so one of the things that we also look at are around Kerberos service tickets. So one of the things that we first look for, and this does require the logon activity license for Change Auditor. So one of the things that we can go and look for is detecting where a Kerberos ticket's created with an unsafe encryption type. So times that I've seen this happen in an environment is what typically happens is, over time, and Microsoft's done a better job of at least enforcing, different encryption algorithms as far as what's used out of the box when, with the server build. But what happens is, over time, what I've seen happen is it could be from a configuration standpoint where, different different applications with the environment are authenticating with some sort of different protocol. And so, what'll happen from a build perspective as an administrator when they're building a server, they may go and, make some configuration changes to what's allowed from the encryption types in the registry within Windows. So, threat actors will go and look for those type of activities to see maybe it might be something that might branch up with their ransomware authentication as kind of a way to kind of it's another way to laterally move through the environment to see if they can authenticate through and kind of get to some of like the golden objects within the environment. So we do alert on these, you do want to run alerts on these, particular events if it's something that does come across as an unsafe encryption type for what we try to detect. So the other Kerberos attack that we look for, which is also key, is around what we call the golden ticket attack. And so this is something that's been commonly referenced as one of the big things to look for in an environment over time. So what happens in these types of scenarios is you have your KRB TGT account, which is built into Windows. It's one of the first accounts that when you actually set up an Active Directory for us, that's one of the first accounts that actually gets created when you create the first domain controller with the environment. What happens over time is that account, from a account password perspective, that's handing out different methods of, or that's handing out different tickets for authenticating to different services within Windows. So what happens over time is that from what threat actors will go and look for is they'll look to go and see on that KRB TGT account what the age of what the last password set was. So we have a built-in search that looks for any ticket events where that's exceeded the maximum ticket lifetime within the past 30 days. And so what most will look for by default is most of your tickets should be active for the common activation date. I think that I've seen on most environments is within 10 hours. What'll happen is when you look at the actual age of the ticket, you're looking at kind of when the last password was actually set on that account. So what we've seen in environments is, we've only seen that actual password be rotated when, they've gone through a forest or domain functional upgrade. So if I've gone from 2008 R2 to 2012 R2 and 2016 and prepping for server 2025, you'll notice that, we identify environments that this is when the last time this was rotated, and they'll say, oh, this is when we were actually doing the first, domain or forest functional level upgrade. Ideally, best practice is you rotate the password on this account every 6 months. There are Microsoft scripts that are out there in the environment written by Microsoft engineers that show how to properly rotate the password on the account. From a security perspective, the way to kind of do it is, the best way to do it is you run the script, rotates the password once, and then wait that kind of I would say like 10 hours, and then rotate it again safely. You don't want to run it back to back unless you're in some sort of actual security incident, because if you run it twice consecutively, it's going to invalidate all the Kerberos tickets with the environment after that effect, and it's going to cause a bunch of havoc and for your administrators, and it's not going to be a very nice day. So you really only rotate. You only run that script twice consecutively within the environment if there's an actual event going on. Otherwise, run the script once, wait the 8 to 10 hours, and then run it again to safely rotate that, and then have that running on a scheduled task.
Yeah, and then one thing I'm going to add to this, Julian, is so the search is in Change Auditor by default in the built-in folders. However, there is just a little bit of configuration that does need to be done. So if you can't figure it out from user guide how to, just reach out to one of your AEs, and then we'll help you configure that too.
That's good guidance, guys. So, and here we'll leave you with a few additional Active Directory events and built-in security searches that you may want to set up with your team. So starting with SID history, that's an attribute in Active Directory that provides backward compatibility to resources in another domain. So if you have these attributes populated in your environment, you'll want to set up alerts on those changes. Admin count. This is an attribute used to indicate the protection status of an object. So you'll want to monitor for changes made to users, groups, or even computers. Last is the service principal name. Now, this is a unique identifier of a service instance. and it's used for Kerberos authentication between a user and a service without providing credentials. So these are a few of our recommendations that we suggest setting alerts up, as these are indicators of a possible cyber attack if these changes weren't intended in your environment.
Let's talk about those alerts and reports.
So looking at, one of the things that we has been kind of one of the themes of the presentation is around applying those protection templates and kind of the power that Change Auditor brings with that feature. So looking at this example here, this is an alert that shows this is a change that was actually that was attempted on a protected object. So when we're looking at it, you'll see that the AD database changes to the DIT file were attempted on this particular domain controller, and then it was denied due to protection being done in place. So in looking at it, you'll see, what user was actually trying to initiate that, and from what server, and what IP, and what domain controller we actually picked up the change coming from. One of the best practices that we recommend on your alerts is that if you do have protection templates deployed, you should have alerts and reporting set up for any of those protected objects, and how to filter out, who manages what within the environment, and make sure that those alerts are being sent off to the administrator, so that they are taking a look, whether it's for something production related, or if it's something that's not authorized in production, and could be an attempt on something being done in your environment.
Yep. And then to kind of add to, monitoring information in your Active Directory, just so you know, if you have Active Directory license, you can also connect your Entra ID tenant instance and monitor some of those critical changes, like role assignments, or maybe a cloud-only user objects created. So there's going to be plenty of events to review, but it's based on what you find is critical to your environment that you want to set up those alerts. But role assignments is, the global administrator is probably a really big one, right? And then one last thing, we know that alert fatigue is a thing, and we all know everyone has rules, just like I did in my previous positions. But maybe, some of these alerts are so common, it's time to convert them to a weekly report. So then the alert itself that you have for other things are a little more meaningful, and you pay attention to them. And then when you convert an alert to report, you can still get that information, so you can review it and ensure that nothing questionable was changed in environment. And also, with that said, is keep in mind that you can customize the views of the searches, as well as those reports that you're going to save either via email notification or to a file share. So you can add additional columns. So again, those reports are more meaningful, especially if you decide to send those reports to a manager, so they can understand better exactly what they're getting.
So, the things that we've kind of talked about today. So with trying to attempt the goal to zero trust, it should be a program mantra that, with your identity and security teams in your environment, it's kind of it's an overarching goal, and it's something that will always be a constant moving goal. It's not something that, I go and remediate, and I put in all these access control changes, and just everything kind of, works itself out. There's always the people and the process behind that actually make that mantra work. It's always an ongoing journey. It's not something that, you run over 6 months and then it's done. It's never touched. So always keep that in the back of your mind, and kind of when you're looking at that journey. The identification of your control plane assets across Active Directory and Entra ID is really the first step you should be doing in looking at that kind of program, and adding those third-party critical identity systems that could lead to a potential incident within your environment. That's something that should be one of the first things that should be done as part of that program, because you don't know what you have if you don't know what you have, right? So, I've seen in different assessments and environments where, a customer's gone in and they've said, oh, we have you know, 10 forests and 20 domains, and then they actually do a full exercise of looking through the environment. And then there's a common example of, these different business units. There's like always a shadow IT example of someone's doing, something with an application in the environment, and they've discovered that they've stood up their own directory that they just use for that, for that particular service. And then there's another forest and domain that's discovered as part of that exercise that now the corporate team has to manage. There's a lot of those common examples. I'm sure a lot of you here have kind of heard, over the years about that. The most important thing that I think we can kind of emphasize from today is, the protection feature in Change Auditor is very powerful. It's one of the things that sets aside Change Auditor from, a lot of products in the market. So, having those protections in place, and working with some customers, that they've kind of said, I've seen it from both sides to say, hey, Change Auditor helped us alert on when something was actually starting or when we think something may have started. If only we had those protection templates in place, we could have stopped an actual attack from happening. Or there's been the other examples, which we like to hear of, there was we actually detected that there was a password spray attack that was actually going on, but we had a protection template that was deployed across our admin account. So, they had an example where some of the admin accounts, but one were affected, and they didn't touch the user accounts. So they were able to go and identify those changes. They were able to identify what was going on, and then with the admin account that was protected, they were able to go and reset all the accounts for the admins, get them back into their system, and they went through the password reset and rotation exercise to help prevent something more massive from happening in the environment too. That's where the protection templates are very valuable. That's something that we like to see in environments. Speaking of protection templates, so we have another webinar coming up next month on April 24th, which is we're calling it Shields Up. So kind of how we use these with Change Auditor and other products to help disrupt. How we can go further in depth to help disrupt identity attacks in flight before they even take place.
Yep. Well, and this is it for today.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everyone, for that informative presentation. We're now open for the questions and answers. Please submit your questions to the chat, and we will do our best to answer them. In the meantime, as Julian said, there's a next webinar on April 24th. You can register by scanning the QR code on the left side of the screen. And we also appreciate if you take a moment to complete our short feedback survey using the QR code that is on the right side of the screen. Your input is always invaluable in shaping future webinars. We'll be here for a few more minutes to address your questions. We look forward to hearing from you. So we have questions. Okay, there are a few questions right there. Like there's one from Anonymous, which says, what are the possibilities of Change Auditor agent services consuming more CPU memory? Does anyone?
So is the question around if protection templates are in place, would it consume more CPU memory? No, it's that's all configured at the the changes are configured at the coordinator level, and then that's just something that the agents will go and look for within the LSAS service. So there's not much, if any, change on CPU consumption if it's deployed if the agents are on their domain controllers.
Okay, hope that answered that question. I'm gonna go from back to the first one. The first one that was noted there is, does the protection templates can send an alert email? It seems there is no alert tab on the protection template definition.
Yeah, I can I can take that. So you can set up an alert as well once you have the protection templates. Just alerts are set up on the searches of the events that are happening when they are related to the protection templates. So again, if you're not sure how to do that, please do not hesitate to reach out to us and your rep, and we'll set up a meeting and help you configure that.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. There's another question says, how do we protect from DC sync? We have a template enabled for DIT file protection. We can see this sync still happening during red team exercises.
Yeah, so I can take this one. So assuming most, pretty much almost all organizations at this point are syncing up identities from Active Directory to Entra ID, you're always gonna have that type of legitimate activity happening with DC sync activities, because obviously, there's going to be the test that's set up where you need to sync up identities, groups, and if you're syncing up devices in Entra ID, that's going to happen. So the most common event when you see that happen in Change Auditor, the most common thing that you'll see is the account that's actually performing that activity would be your if you have Entra Connect synced up configured on premises, would be your MSOL sync accounts. So from that aspect of it, you should have, if you know that if you know which MSOL sync accounts you have in your environment, those are the alerts that you're going to want to monitor, but also acknowledge that those are going to be that's going to be a safe activity to do so. The other common one that you'll see will be around if you have a backup service that's more guided around, taking if you have a backup agent that's doing either just backups of your domain controllers or backups of your of the DIT file. If you have your protection template in place for DIT file, you would have your the backup agent, like if you're using a product like RMAN DRE or some other product that is performing Active Directory specific backups, you'll see that happening for Active Directory backups. So there are exemptions. You may have those are some of the type of exemptions that you want to put in place on that particular type of template, so that you can kind of suppress the noise. So you're always going to see some sort of DC sync activity, especially when you're syncing up from on-premises to Entra ID. You just want to make sure that those legitimate accounts that need to do that for those particular purposes are allowed to do it, and you audit and monitor for those the anomalous events. Those are the ones that you're going to want to pay attention to.
And then, Julian, I was going to say is, since that user mentioned they still see some events for DC Sync even after protecting the DIT database, I think it would be great to actually see what that environment looks like and what kind of other events they are generating. So if you want, if you're willing to set up a meeting with your AE, with your rep and one of us, we would love to see it. So if there is actually maybe some improvements that we need to do, we would love to see that.
Awesome. Next question is, does it slow anything protecting Active Directory database? Is there any minus?
No, it won't really slow anything. You won't see any slowness when putting the DIT protection in place. It's another protection template that just you layer in place that's added as part of your Change Auditor configuration. There really is no minus from a performance perspective or from a security perspective to protecting the DIT file. So kind of the guidance always is to, before you put a protection template in place to even start, is taking a look at the events and seeing what's being flagged from an audit perspective, and then taking those the most common accounts that, as we kind of mentioned in the previous example, that would be accessing the DIT file, and then taking those, adding that into the exemption process when you create the protection template, and then monitoring for those anomalous accounts or anomalous accounts that would be going ahead and then accessing the DIT file after the protections put in place. But there's no harmful benefit from a security or a performance perspective, from a Change Auditor perspective, in enabling that.
And we do have some customers actually using some of these protection templates too. And so far, there hasn't been any negative feedback on it as well.
Okay, next question is, will this session be recorded? Pat replied, yes, this session is recorded and will be shared to everyone who registered. An email will be sent next week where you can check the link and re-review it if you like to. Okay, moving on to the next one. It says, does monitoring Azure AD need specific module or license installed?
I could take this one, guys. So we had mentioned earlier that you have that ability to audit your Entra ID tenant, and it is included in your Active Directory license for Change Auditor. So you would just have to set up an auditing template, and there's a wizard that kind of guides you through. You'll need your tenant ID at least, and obviously the permissions to do so. And you'll need the ability to create an application ID and key. So those are the permissions that are required to do so. And of course, if you have any issues setting that up, again, reach out to your AE and we can set up a meeting and give you some assistance on that. And of course, there's also information that you can find from the technical resources on our site as well. But it is included in the Active Directory module.
Awesome. And next question is, I want to see membership of critical groups like domain admin, server ops, etc. Do we have that data in QCA SQL?
Okay, so as far as, a static stateful information in the, group membership, so Change Auditor doesn't really have that information. Change Auditor audits the changes that are happening to those groups, right? So if you wanted, you probably most likely will need to use a PowerShell command to get the membership, or if you have a product like Enterprise Reporter, that product will give you a good reports on what's in your groups as far as stateful data. If somebody does make a change on a group, adds or remove the member, Change Auditor will have that. And you can search that through the searches, or if you wanted to look through the back end in SQL, you're welcome to that too.
Thank you, Anna. Perhaps you answered the following question already, but let me just see. Thank you. Protections are great. Do you have a quick reference white paper, or what should be a baseline? If so, please send the link. Is there a link we can share?
Yeah, so I can work on oh, go ahead. Was that Anna? Or
I was going to say, yeah, I don't think there's, I don't know off the top of my head right now, but we could probably provide something. We can find, there's information on protections in the user guide, what's what, but we also have other documents kind of giving you ideas on what is best to protect from security perspective to make sure that you get to protect your environment as much as possible.
Okay. If you guys have any links, I can make sure we add it to the email that I sent the following week, including with the link of this video to be watched on demand. The next one is, if Quest Change Auditor server is stopped, does the template protection still active?
That's actually a really good question. So if we're talking about Change Auditor coordinator server itself is stopped, the agents are still going to run on those servers that are, running also the protection. So as long as the agent is not stopped on the servers, the protections should still be working. The downside is if your coordinator does go down, depending on what happens with that situation, and the agent is not able to send the events that it was collecting while the coordinator was offline, you may be missing some events. But if the agent does not go down and it's running, it should offline collect the events that are happening on those systems, and then when coordinator gets back up, those events get resent again to the coordinator.
Thank you. The last question that I have is, let's say we have a protection policies for GPOs and coordinator is offline. What will be the impact to allow or deny changes?
Well, then, sorry, I was reading the previous one because
Okay.
there's somebody that actually asked about the Entra ID again too. Um,
Let me refresh my page.
Yeah, so this question is
Mhm.
kind of the same as the previous one that I answered. So if coordinator is offline, as long as the agents are running on the domain controllers, the protection still be active and protecting those GPOs too.
Okay.
But yeah, from William, the Entra ID auditing. So like Jen mentioned, that is part of Active Directory license. So if you have Active Directory license, you should be able to audit your Entra ID. Just has to you have to do some configuration in Change Auditor.
Thank you, Anna. I think we answer all the questions. If there is one I'm missing, if you can please repost that, that would be great. Let's just give it a minute to see if anybody else has answered any other, would like to ask any other questions. In the meantime, I just want to thank Anna, Julian, and Jennifer for sharing their expertise. Also, if you have any further questions, you can also visit our support portal at support.quest.com. And we look forward as well to seeing you on April 24th on the Shields Up Disrupting Identity Attacks in Flight webinar. There seems to be no question there. It says, I believe you saw that one before I did, Anna. It says, I removed the question about Entra ID licensing since it was already answered. Thank you all so much. Oh, okay. No wonder I couldn't see that one. Um, let's see. Where can we find all critical searches? Is there a guide to have the most important ones?
So this information is not in user guides, but we can provide we have some other documentation that we can give you guys that we've created on our own that we think could be useful to you guys. So we surely can share that with you.
How would they get that information? Should they contact the AE as well?
Uh, I I will share that with you, Luciano, so you can
Okay.
share it with with the email
Email?
that you will send out.
Okay, thank you. I'll make sure to include that then. And that email goes to everyone who registered, including the people that weren't able to participate and registered for today's session. Okay, well, there doesn't seem to be any additional questions. We will stay here. I'll stay here in case anybody else has answers. And but thank you for your time and have a great rest of the day.